Hello everyone, and welcome back to Sun Moon Audiobook, the channel where we share wisdom and inspiring book journeys to help you grow and develop your best self, inside and out. There is a quiet power in rivers. They do not rush in panic, yet they carve valleys, shape mountains, and carry life wherever they flow. What seems soft is, in truth, unshakably strong, because it moves with persistence and with rhythm. Influence, the kind of influence that Robert Cialdini speaks of, is like this river. It doesn't always roar, it doesn't always crash, but it moves steadily, reshaping human behavior in ways we rarely notice, until we look back and see how much of our lives has been carved by its current. Cialdini himself is not just an academic, he is a seeker of hidden truths about human nature. A psychologist who stepped into the shadows where persuasion operates. He spent years watching, listening, embedding himself in the real-world trenches of sales, marketing, and negotiations. He didn't just theorize from the distance of a classroom, he walked into the rooms where persuasion breathes. What makes his work so enduring is that he writes not as someone pointing a finger at human weakness, but as someone gently uncovering the quiet strings that pull at all of us. He gives us language for the invisible, and in doing so, he gives us freedom, the freedom to choose with awareness instead of being carried unknowingly by the current. And so, we begin with reciprocity. It is one of the oldest human agreements, older than currency, older than contracts, the heartbeat of cooperation itself. When someone gives us something, we feel a deep urge to give back. It is stitched into us like muscle memory because reciprocity kept tribes alive and communities strong. But in the modern world, this same principle is often turned into a lever, pulled quietly by those who know its power. Think of the free sample at the store. You taste, you smile, and suddenly a small part of you feels indebted, as if you owe them something, even though you never asked for the gift. This is not manipulation in the overt sense. It's something gentler, something more insidious, because it feels like fairness. But pause and ask yourself, how many times have you said yes to something, not because you wanted it, but because you felt the weight of an invisible obligation? The truth is, we are wired to respond. And in that wiring lies both our vulnerability and our chance for connection. And the mantra I want you to hold here, quietly in your chest, is this: not every gift requires a return. Then comes commitment and consistency, the pull of being aligned with what we once declared. Human beings love to see themselves as stable, coherent, reliable. If you sign a petition, you are far more likely later to donate to the cause, not because the petition required it, but because you want to remain consistent with your earlier stance. There is beauty in this, because consistency helps us build identities and trust. But there is also danger, for we can be bound by commitments that no longer serve us. Imagine how many times in your life you've held onto an agreement, a relationship, a job, not because it was right, but because walking away would feel like betraying your past self. Consistency, when blind, can be a cage. And yet, when chosen consciously, it becomes a compass. Remember this mantra as it echoes softly. Your past commitments do not own your future. Social proof, then, is the whisper of the crowd. We look to others to know what is right, what is safe, what is valuable. If others are laughing, we laugh. If they are looking up at the sky, we crane our necks too. It is a survival instinct, and in many ways, it protects us. But it also shapes us in ways that make us smaller. Social proof has filled stadiums, built revolutions, and also silenced countless voices that might have spoken differently. Think of the stories of leaders who dared to break from the crowd. Steve Jobs insisting on a vision of design that seemed unnecessary at the time, or Rosa Parks refusing to stand, sparking a movement that rippled through generations. Both moments remind us that social proof is not always the proof of truth. You, listening right now, may have silenced your own instincts because the room leaned a different way. But perhaps, just perhaps, your silence was never meant to be permanent. Then there is liking, a principle as simple as it is profound. We say yes to those we like, those who mirror us, those who make us feel seen. Charisma has toppled barriers that logic could not. We buy from people who smile like us, dress like us, share our stories. And in this, we glimpse something tender, the human hunger to be connected, to belong. Yet liking is not always love. It is sometimes a cloak worn by those who seek advantage. That charming salesperson, that magnetic influencer, do they truly see you? Or do they simply know the buttons to press? And still, liking is not the enemy. It is a reminder that relationships move us, that the heart often speaks louder than reason. The lesson is not to distrust liking, but to notice when it guides us blindly and to reclaim our choices with clarity. Authority enters the room dressed in certainty. A uniform, a title, an accent of confidence, these symbols can quiet our doubts in seconds. Authority can save lives, as when a doctor prescribes the right medicine or a pilot steers a plane through storm. But it can also lead us astray, for history is filled with examples of obedience taken too far. Stanley Milgram's experiments showed us how ordinary people, urged on by an authority figure, could harm others in ways they would never imagine on their own. And still, authority isn't evil. It is simply powerful. Like fire, it can warm us or it can burn. What matters is whether we surrender our judgment or whether we stand in it firmly, even in the presence of power. Scarcity is the final whisper, the tick of the clock, the sign that says last chance. We are magnetized by what we might lose, more than what we might gain. Scarcity makes diamonds shimmer brighter, makes limited offers irresistible, makes us grasp for what may slip through our fingers. And yet, scarcity is often an illusion, crafted to push us toward haste. How many times have you bought something because it was only available today, only to see the same offer appear again next week? Scarcity triggers urgency, but urgency does not always mean importance. To live fully, we must learn to pause in the face of scarcity, to ask ourselves whether the value is real or whether it is only the smoke of desire. There was a moment once when I stood in a bookstore, holding a book I hadn't planned to buy. A stranger had smiled at me earlier, pressing the same book into my hands, saying softly, "This changed me." I hadn't known them, hadn't needed the book. Yet as I held it, I felt the weight of reciprocity, the tug of social proof, the warmth of liking, all converging into one quiet decision. I walked out with it, realizing hours later that I hadn't chosen entirely on my own. Influence had been at work, and yet that book truly did shape me in unexpected ways, reminding me that persuasion isn't always theft. Sometimes it is the gentle push that leads us where we were meant to go. You, who are listening right now, have been shaped by these forces more times than you know. They are not chains, but currents. And when you learn to see them, you can swim with intention. Notice the gifts that come with no strings. Notice the commitments that no longer serve you. Notice when the crowd leans, when authority speaks, when scarcity knocks. And most of all, notice the small ways you can use these same principles not to manipulate, but to uplift. Imagine using reciprocity to spread kindness, consistency to grow healthy habits, social proof to amplify good, liking to build bridges, authority to guide wisely, and scarcity to cherish the moments that are truly fleeting. And so the current continues, deeper and more relentless, winding through the hidden chambers of persuasion, where we often forget that choice is not just about logic, but about the emotions that ripple underneath. Influence is not a trick book. It is a mirror, showing us the faces we make when we want to belong, the hands we extend when we feel we owe, the nods we give when someone powerful tells us what to do. And in every reflection lies a question not of whether we are influenced, for we always are, but of how conscious we are of the forces shaping us. Think again of reciprocity. In its rawest form, it is a beautiful bond, a trust-building instinct. It is what compels neighbors to shovel each other's driveways in winter, what makes friends exchange gifts not out of necessity, but out of love. Yet when reciprocity is borrowed by commerce, it wears a different face. Charities send unsolicited small gifts in the mail, an addressed label, a calendar, a keychain, and suddenly donation rates soar. Not because the gift is valuable, but because the recipient feels the pull to balance the scales. A free drink at a restaurant, a free trial for a service hall, are doorways created by reciprocity. The thing to remember is that this is not evil by default. Reciprocity can move us toward generosity, toward community, but when wielded as strategy alone, it becomes a string tugged quietly by unseen hands. And when you see it, you are free. Free to choose whether this gift requires your return, or whether gratitude can exist without obligation. Consistency, though, is subtler because it is wrapped up in identity. Once we say something aloud, write it down, or sign our name to it, it becomes a piece of our story, and stories are powerful. Consider the small act of telling yourself, "I am a runner," instead of "I run sometimes." The difference shapes behavior. One is an activity, the other is an identity. Marketers and leaders know this well. They ask for small yeses, a signature, a pledge, a trial, because they know each small step is not just an action, but a declaration of self. And once we declare, we want to be consistent. Yet the beauty of this principle is not just in how it can trap us, but in how it can free us. You can choose to commit to kindness, to growth, to courage, and your desire for consistency will carry you forward like a tailwind. Consistency can be the cage, but it can also be the compass. The difference lies in whether you chose the commitment consciously, or whether it was planted in you without your noticing. Social proof, in this way, is both comfort and danger. Think about the fire alarm experiment, where individuals sat in a room filling with smoke. Alone, people often rose quickly to sound the alarm, but in groups where others ignored the smoke, most people sat still, paralyzed by the silence of the crowd. It is terrifying, isn't it? How the absence of action in others can silence the alarm bells in our own bodies? And yet, this is how humans survive in groups, by scanning the environment, by checking the eyes of others to see if fear is justified. This instinct has saved lives, but it has also allowed tragedies to unfold. The lesson here is simple, but not easy. The crowd is not always right. Sometimes the smoke you see is real, even if others look away. And sometimes the courage to stand, to move, to say something first, that is the act that breaks the spell of social proof and awakens others. Social proof is strong, but so too is the individual spark that dares to stand against it. Liking draws us next, like a warm fire on a cold night. It is the glow of connection, the tilt of a smile that makes us lean in. And we are persuaded more easily by those we like, admire, or relate to. This is why advertisers use attractive spokespeople, why salespeople mirror our posture, why we're drawn to leaders who remind us of ourselves. But liking, for all its softness, can be sharpened into a blade. We buy because we like the salesperson, even if the product is unworthy. We nod along with those who flatter us, even if their words hide ulterior motives. Yet liking itself is not false. It is our deep hunger for belonging made visible. What matters is that we notice when it guides our yeses and remember to ask, is this yes given to the person or to the value of what they bring? Authority is perhaps the loudest of the principles, though it rarely shouts. Authority often whispers with certainty, and certainty is magnetic. When someone wears the white coat of a doctor, the badge of an officer, the title of an expert, we lean in, we obey, we silence our doubts. And authority can be life-saving, for we cannot know everything and must sometimes trust those who know more. But history has shown us how easily authority can lead to harm. Think of those who followed orders blindly, only to later regret the obedience that silenced their conscience. Authority should be questioned not because it is always wrong, but because it is always powerful. And power deserves our awareness, our scrutiny, our choice. Scarcity is the final thread, and perhaps the most primal. The thought of losing something is more powerful than the thought of gaining. A product labeled limited edition sells faster, even if it is not unique. A one-day sale pushes us to buy, even if the same sale will appear next week. Scarcity grips us because our ancestors lived in a world where what was rare could mean the difference between survival and loss. But in a world of abundance, scarcity is often a story crafted to move us. And yet, true scarcity still exists: the fleeting moment, the once-in-a-lifetime experience, the breath of today that will never return. If scarcity teaches us anything, it should be to cherish, to savor, to hold close what truly matters. And in the middle of this journey, there is an emotional pause. Perhaps you feel a heaviness now, recognizing how often these principles have guided your steps without your noticing. There may be shame, a sense of having been fooled, of being weaker than you thought. But listen to me. You are not weak. You are human. And humanity is not about never being influenced. It is about learning to see the invisible strings and deciding when you will let them guide you and when you will cut them loose. Influence is not the enemy. Blindness is. And you, by listening, are already awakening. From here, we turn toward renewal. Influence is not only something done to you, it is something you can embody, something you can wield with care. Leaders who have changed the world have done so not by resisting these principles, but by harnessing them with integrity. Think of Martin Luther King Jr., whose authority came not from a title, but from a moral clarity that made others trust his voice. Think of Oprah Winfrey, whose ability to build liking and trust turned her platform into a movement of empowerment. They did not deny these principles. They used them, aligned them with truth and service, and in doing so, they transformed them from tools of manipulation into instruments of change. You too can do this. In your daily life, you can offer gifts without strings, embody consistency in the values that matter most, create ripples of good through social proof by showing others what courage looks like, deepen connection by liking with sincerity, use your authority, whatever its scale, to guide gently, and honor scarcity not as marketing, but as mindfulness of life's fleeting beauty. These are not grand gestures. They are small choices, repeated, like drops of water that wear away stone. Influence does not need to be a weapon. It can be a river of kindness, carving paths that nourish rather than control. And so the river bends once more, carrying us into the tender heart of how influence touches not just markets and sales, but the soul of human connection itself. When you begin to see these principles at work, they stop being abstract psychology and start becoming part of the everyday pulse of your life. Think of reciprocity in your closest relationships. How often do we find ourselves giving not purely from generosity, but from an unspoken dance of balance? A friend drives you home, so the next time you reach for the check at dinner. A neighbor brings you soup when you're sick, and you remember it for years, waiting for the right moment to give back. These moments are not shallow. They are reminders that human bonds are built on a rhythm of give and take, but the danger lies in mistaking reciprocity for obligation rather than love. To give freely, without the shadow of expectation, is to transform reciprocity back into what it was meant to be: the heartbeat of community. Consistency, in this same way, shapes the way we love and grow. Imagine someone who says, "I will always be here for you," and then proves it through small acts, again and again. That consistency builds trust deeper than any promise made once and forgotten. Yet consistency can also keep people trapped in harmful patterns, staying in a relationship that wounds them because they once said they would never leave, or continuing a path that no longer feels true because changing directions feels like betrayal. The truth, my friend, is that consistency becomes strength when it is aligned with your values, and it becomes weakness when it is chained to your fear. Your past declarations do not own you. You are allowed to rewrite your commitments, and in that rewriting, you can find freedom. Social proof takes root in our personal lives too. Consider the moments when laughter becomes contagious, when joy spreads like wildfire because one person dared to show it first. That is the beauty of social proof. It multiplies emotion, amplifies courage. But think too of silence in a room when no one dares to name the truth. That silence spreads as powerfully as laughter. Social proof is a double-edged sword. It can either lock us into conformity, or it can free us into collective courage. And perhaps for you, the invitation is this: to be the one who stands first, who speaks first, who chooses differently, knowing that others may follow the light you kindle. Liking, too, can shape lives beyond the world of persuasion. Think about how deeply we are drawn to those who reflect us back to ourselves, those who share our stories, who make us feel understood. Liking is not superficial. It is a mirror of belonging. Yet we must learn to recognize when our liking blinds us. A charming voice, a familiar smile, a shared joke, these can tilt us toward trust too quickly. But at its best, liking teaches us that influence is relational. We do not move one another through cold facts alone. We move one another through warmth, through empathy, through connection. If you long to be heard, then first, make others feel seen. If you long to influence, then first, listen with sincerity. Authority in life extends beyond uniforms and titles. Sometimes authority comes from wisdom carried quietly, from scars earned in silence, from the steady presence of someone who has walked a road before us. We all carry authority in some way as parents, as friends, as mentors, as colleagues. The question is not whether we hold it, but how we wield it. Authority can be used to silence, or it can be used to guide with compassion. It can demand obedience, or it can inspire trust. To notice authority in ourselves is to notice responsibility, the power to shape decisions, not just by what we know, but by how we carry what we know. Scarcity, finally, presses its hand on our hearts every day, not just in products or sales, but in the awareness of time, of moments that pass and never return. Scarcity whispers in the ticking of the clock, in the fleeting glow of a sunset, in the way a child grows taller overnight. It is easy to fall for manufactured scarcity, to chase what is marketed as rare, while overlooking the true treasures that are slipping quietly through our fingers. The scarcity that matters is not in store shelves, but in moments of connection, breaths of presence, words left unsaid. Scarcity is a call to cherish, to wake up to the fragile beauty of what is here, right now, before it is gone. At this point, you may feel both empowered and unsettled, aware of the invisible hands that move through your choices. You may wonder how to walk forward with clarity, how to know when you are free, and when you are being swayed. The truth is, awareness is already a form of freedom. Once you see the strings, you can choose whether to let them guide you or to cut them loose. And you can also choose to weave them yourself, to influence with integrity. Influence is not the enemy. Blindness is. To live awake is to live empowered. So, what does this mean for your daily life? It means pausing when someone offers you something for free, not to harden your heart, but to ask gently, am I choosing this return freely, or am I driven by obligation? It means revisiting your commitments, not to abandon them lightly, but to ensure they align with who you are becoming, not just who you once were. It means looking at the crowd and asking, is this silence true, or is it fear? It means letting liking guide you into empathy, but not letting it blind you into agreement without thought. It means respecting authority, but never surrendering the compass of your own conscience. And it means honoring scarcity, not in advertisements, but in life itself, savoring the rare and the fleeting, the sunrise, the laughter, the breath. Perhaps this feels overwhelming. Perhaps you feel that these forces are too strong, that you cannot possibly stand against them. But hear me, influence does not need to be fought against. It can be danced with. When you know its rhythm, you no longer stumble in the dark. You begin to move with awareness, to sway when you choose, to step aside when you must. Influence becomes not a trap, but a current you can navigate. And in learning this, you discover that the true power of influence is not just in resisting it, but in using it to shape the world with kindness, with clarity, with love. And now, we come to the part of the river where the water slows, where its surface reflects back more than it carries forward, where we are invited not only to understand, but to feel. Influence is not just a book about persuasion techniques, it is a meditation on being human, on the ways we seek to belong, the ways we protect ourselves, and the ways we can be guided without even noticing. When Cialdini laid these truths before us, He was not condemning humanity. He was whispering, "Look closer, be aware, awaken." And when we awaken, we are changed. Let's step once more into the quiet pull of reciprocity. Imagine someone handing you a flower on the street. No words, no strings, just a simple bloom placed in your hand. For many, this act feels beautiful, but also unsettling. Why? Because a part of us immediately begins scanning. What do they want? Where is the catch? This is how deep reciprocity runs. It makes us uneasy with imbalance. Businesses have learned this. Religions have learned this. Charities have learned this. And yet, the deeper truth is that the gift itself is not what binds us. It is our story of fairness, our longing for balance. If you can recognize that, then you can receive gifts freely without being compelled. And more importantly, you can give in ways that free others rather than bind them. The shift is subtle but profound. To give not to demand return, but to remind someone they are worthy. Not every gift requires a return. Repeat it like a mantra. Breathe it in like medicine, because it loosens the chains of guilt that reciprocity can wrap around us. Consistency, too, asks us to listen closely to our inner stories. There is a beautiful experiment Cialdini shares, where homeowners were first asked to display a small sign in their window supporting safe driving. Later, when asked to place a large, awkward billboard on their lawn for the same cause, those who had taken the first small step were far more likely to agree. Why? Because having already said yes, they wanted to remain consistent. And this is how change often happens, not through grand declarations, but through small steps that accumulate until they reshape who we are. The caution, however, is to choose those first steps carefully. A small yes to what you do not truly want can snowball into commitments that suffocate you. A small yes to what aligns with your values can blossom into a life of integrity. So the question becomes, which small steps are you saying yes to? Consistency will carry you either way. Let it carry you toward the truth of who you long to be. Social proof can feel like the loudest of all the principles, because it echoes in the bones of our fear of isolation. The laughter track in a sitcom makes us laugh more. Reviews online guide our purchases more than we like to admit. If a room of people looks toward the ceiling, we crane our necks too, almost instinctively. This is how deeply we crave the safety of the herd. But there is a paradox here. Social proof can chain us, but it can also free us. Think of the civil rights marches, where one voice singing became 2, then 10, then 1,000. Each person emboldened the next, until what began as fragile became unstoppable. The principle is the same. We follow the signals of others, but the difference lies in who dares to signal first. You may be that person, whether you know it or not. You may be the spark in your circle, the one who chooses truth while others hesitate. And by doing so, you may invite others to stand too. The whisper of the crowd can silence you, but it can also amplify you. Which one it becomes often depends on the courage of a single person. Liking is more delicate, more subtle, yet it carries enormous weight. We say yes to people we like, and we like people who reflect us, flatter us, or share common ground. This is why so many business deals are sealed on golf courses, why charismatic leaders can inspire movements even without strong arguments, why friendships often form around similarity. But liking can be exploited, twisted into a tool. We are more likely to buy from someone attractive, more likely to agree with someone who compliments us, more likely to trust someone who seems familiar. And yet, at its core, liking is not a weakness. It is a reminder of the importance of warmth, empathy, and connection in persuasion. If you want to move people, do not begin with facts, begin with humanity. Begin with making someone feel seen. Influence rooted in liking is not manipulation when it is born of sincerity. It is simply the power of relationship. Authority looms larger, dressed in the clothing of certainty. Think of the famous experiment where participants were told by a man in a lab coat to administer electric shocks to another person. Despite their discomfort, many continued simply because authority told them to. This is chilling, and it shows how authority bypasses our doubt. We defer to experts, to leaders, to voices that sound confident, often more than we should. And yet, Authority is not false by default. A surgeon's knowledge saves lives. A pilot's training keeps hundreds safe. The question is not whether to trust authority, but when. The deepest wisdom here is that authority should be earned, not just worn. And for you listening, the call is this: do not surrender your conscience to any voice, no matter how authoritative, without pausing to ask if it aligns with truth. Scarcity, finally, is the principle that cuts deepest because it speaks to our primal fear of loss. Imagine being told a product is almost sold out or a chance is once in a lifetime. Suddenly, your heart races, urgency surges, and reason shrinks. Scarcity pulls us faster than almost anything else. But here too lies a paradox. Manufactured scarcity, the fake countdown timer, the repeated last chance sale preys on us. But real scarcity, the days of your life, the finite number of moments you have with loved ones, should awaken us. Scarcity is meant to remind us of value, not to trick us into impulse. So let it remind you of what matters most. The sunset outside your window will never be repeated. The hug you give today cannot be stored for tomorrow. Scarcity, at its truest, is an invitation to cherish. And here, let me pause with you, not to teach, but to simply breathe. Because I know that as you listen, you may feel both seen and shaken. These forces have shaped you, often without your awareness. But awareness is the beginning of freedom. You are not powerless. You are not destined to be manipulated endlessly. You are learning to see, and seeing is the first step toward choosing. Influence does not need to diminish you. It can empower you. The current does not always drag you. Sometimes it carries you, if you learn how to swim with it. And so, the story flows onward, carrying us deeper into the quiet realization that these principles of influence are not just tools others use on us, but forces that we ourselves are capable of embodying. To see them is to hold them, and to hold them is to decide what kind of imprint we will leave on the people around us. Influence is not reserved for politicians, advertisers, or leaders of nations. It belongs to you, in every conversation you have, every kindness you extend, every silence you break or maintain. It is in the way you shape the world of the people closest to you, often without even knowing it. Think again of reciprocity. Imagine using it not as a tactic, but as a gift. You send someone a note of encouragement, not because you want anything in return, but because you know it will place warmth in their hands. Later, perhaps, they will think of you when you need support. That is reciprocity. In gentle magic, it builds webs of trust that hold us together when the storms come. In the hands of commerce, reciprocity can pressure us, but in the hands of love, it strengthens us. So, if you wish to influence with integrity, begin here. Give freely, without the shadow of expectation, and trust that generosity plants seeds whose growth you may not always see. Consistency can be turned inward as well. If you long to change, to build a new habit, to become someone stronger or kinder, then consistency can be your ally. Begin with small declarations that align with the life you want. Say to yourself, I am someone who chooses growth, and then let every small action reaffirm that truth. The human desire to be consistent can lock us in cages when our commitments are unwise, but it can also lift us into lives of purpose when our commitments are chosen with care. You are not at the mercy of consistency, you can make it your compass. Choose carefully what you declare, because your heart will want to follow. Social proof can also be harnessed for light. If you stand up for kindness, if you speak words of truth, if you show courage in the face of silence, you make it easier for others to do the same. Imagine the way one candle, lit in darkness, allows others to strike their matches without fear. That is the essence of social proof. Influence is contagious, but so is courage, so is compassion. You may not realize it, but every act you make in public ripples outward, teaching others how to be. If you want to shape the world, do not wait for the crowd. Be the signal that shifts the crowd. Liking, too, can be cultivated as something sacred. The truth is, people are more open to being moved when they feel valued, when they feel seen. If you want to influence someone, do not begin with arguments, begin with listening. Begin with empathy. Begin with connection. Influence rooted in liking is not about tricking someone into saying yes. It is about creating a bond strong enough that their yes becomes genuine. Think of leaders who were loved not because they were perfect, but because they were authentic, vulnerable, human. That is the power of liking at its best. It is not shallow charm, but deep resonance. Authority, when embraced with humility, becomes guidance rather than control. Perhaps you are not a general or a CEO, but you are an authority in your own circles, to your children, to your friends, to those who trust your voice. What will you do with that power? Authority can crush, but it can also protect. It can silence, but it can also empower. When you use whatever authority you hold to uplift rather than to dominate, you embody the kind of influence that heals. True authority is never about demanding obedience. It is about inspiring trust. And scarcity, perhaps the most personal of all, is your reminder to treasure what matters most. We chase after things marketed as rare while ignoring the moments slipping through our fingers. Scarcity is life itself. Each day you live is one day less in the story of your time. This is not meant to frighten you, but to awaken you. Scarcity, when seen clearly, invites gratitude. It reminds you that the people you love are not guaranteed, that the beauty of this moment is unrepeatable. Scarcity calls you to live not later, but now, to cherish not when things are perfect, but when they are present. And here, let me tell you something tender. Once, I watched a child blow bubbles into the air on a summer evening. They floated, delicate and glistening, catching the last light of the sun. Some drifted high and popped softly against the sky. Others burst almost as soon as they left the wand. And it struck me, this is life. Beautiful, fragile, fleeting. Scarcity is written into every bubble, every breath, every heartbeat. And the lesson is not to grasp frantically, but to marvel, to hold wonder even as things slip away. Scarcity is not only a tool of persuasion, it is a call to awe. You, who are listening right now, carry within you the power to reshape the way these forces move through your life. You are not only someone influenced, you are someone who influences. Every smile, every silence, every yes and every no, they all ripple outward. Perhaps you have underestimated the impact you have. Perhaps you have forgotten that your voice, your choices, your presence shape the worlds of others in ways you may never fully know. But you do. You always have. And if you begin to wield these principles with awareness, with integrity, you can shape lives not through manipulation, but through love. And so, we arrive at the quiet truth that sits beneath all of this. Influence is not some external force pressing down on us from the world. It is the fabric of connection itself. Every culture, every friendship, every exchange is built upon these threads, whether we notice them or not. They are not inherently manipulative, not inherently pure. They are simply human. And when Robert Cialdini revealed them to us, he wasn't writing a manual for tricksters. He was writing a guide for awareness. He was saying, if you know these principles, you can protect yourself from being used, and you can also use them to lead with heart. Reciprocity, consistency, social proof, liking, authority, scarcity, each one is both a doorway and a mirror. A doorway because it opens into action, a mirror because it reflects something essential about who we are. When we feel the tug of reciprocity, we are seeing our own deep-rooted need for fairness. When we are drawn by consistency, we are staring at our longing to be coherent, to be seen as reliable. When we are swayed by social proof, we are hearing our desire for belonging echoing back to us. When liking persuades us, we are gazing at our hunger for connection. When authority bends our will, we are witnessing our trust in expertise and guidance. And when scarcity sparks urgency in us, we are confronting our fear of loss. Each principle is not a weakness, but a window into what it means to be human. Think about how many leaders throughout history have woven these threads together into movements that changed the world. Mahatma Gandhi, for example, understood the authority not of weapons, but of moral clarity. His life became consistent with his message of nonviolence, and that consistency became unshakable influence. Millions followed, not because he shouted louder, but because his every act aligned with his declaration. Or consider someone like Elon Musk, whose use of scarcity has amplified desire for his product's limited releases, waiting lists, the sense that only a few can access the next wave of technology. Whether you agree with him or not, the principle is alive in his work, bending the world toward action. These are not isolated tricks. They are patterns that repeat again and again because they touch something deep in the human spirit. But it is not just the famous who use these forces. You do too, in ways you may not notice. When you keep a promise, you are building influence through consistency. When you smile warmly at someone, you are shaping their openness through liking. When you speak with confidence about something you truly know, you are exercising authority. When you share your gratitude, you are planting reciprocity. Influence is not far away from you. It is in every gesture, every word, every presence you bring into the room. And perhaps this is where the journey takes its most intimate turn. What will you do with this knowledge? Because knowing you are influenced is freeing, but knowing you are an influencer not in the modern social media sense, but in the oldest, truest sense is transforming. It means you no longer walk through life passively, but actively, with awareness. You see the levers, and you choose how to pull them. You see the river, and you choose how to swim in it. You are not just carried, you are co-creating the current. And yet, this truth can feel heavy, because awareness brings responsibility. To know how easily people are swayed by liking or scarcity or authority means you could, if you wished, manipulate them. And perhaps that thought makes you uneasy. But this is the point. Influence will always exist. The question is not whether you use it, but how. Will you use it to bend people for your gain alone? Or will you use it to lift, to empower, to guide with honesty? Influence is a river. It can flood, or it can nourish. The choice is yours. As you carry these ideas into your own life, imagine small, doable actions. The next time you are offered something free, pause before giving in to obligation, breathe, and ask yourself, am I choosing freely? The next time you feel locked into an old promise, whisper to yourself, my past commitments do not own my future, and then decide from the present, not the past. The next time you feel silenced by the crowd, remember that silence does not equal truth, and perhaps let your voice be the one that rises. When you sense yourself drawn by charm, notice it, and ask whether your decision is for the person or the value. When authority speaks, respect it, but keep your conscience awake. And when scarcity presses urgency on you, slow down and ask, is this truly rare? Or is the real scarcity the beauty of this present moment? You, listening right now, are not powerless. You are not a pawn in the hands of the world. You are a participant, a co-creator, a voice that matters. Influence is not about tricks. It is about awareness. And the awareness you now hold is a kind of armor, but also a kind of key. It protects you from being taken, but it also opens doors to leading with strength, with compassion, with clarity. You do not need to fear influence. You need to learn its rhythm. And once you do, you will find that influence itself becomes less about control and more about flow, a dance between giving and receiving, between guiding and being guided. And here, as the current slows toward its end, let us leave with one final image. Picture a single ripple on a still pond. A pebble drops, and the circles widen outward, touching the edges you cannot see. This is influence. Every word you speak, every act you make, every silence you keep is a pebble. The ripples spread far beyond what you will ever know. And if you choose with awareness, your ripples can be ripples of light, of kindness, of courage. You may not see where they end, but they will go on. So let this be your quiet challenge. This week, notice one moment of influence in your life, either a way you are swayed or a way you sway others, and pause. Reflect. Choose with intention. Begin small, for influence, like the river, like the ripple, is built not in one crash but in many small flows. And as this journey closes, I invite you to carry it forward. If this message touched you, if it made you pause, if it opened a door of awareness, then share it. Like it, comment, subscribe, pass it on to someone who may need it too. Your engagement is not just support, it is a ripple, spreading this light further, reaching others who are still moving in the dark. And together, perhaps, we can make these invisible strings visible, not to control, but to awaken. There is a quiet tenderness in recognizing that influence is not an abstract idea at all, but the very language of our everyday lives. We are constantly speaking it, even when we don't know the words. The way you hold the door open for a stranger, the way you answer a child's endless questions, the way you smile at someone who looks tired on the train, all of these are forms of influence. And they matter. They matter more than we think, because people do not remember the majority of facts they are told, but they remember the feeling of being moved, of being seen, of being nudged gently in one direction or another. Influence, then, is not just power. It is responsibility. It is a lantern you hold, and the way you tilt it casts light or shadow. If reciprocity reminds us to give freely, it also reminds us to forgive ourselves when we cannot give back. Too many of us live burdened by invisible debts. Someone was kind to us, so we feel forever obligated. Someone sacrificed for us, so we feel guilty if we ever prioritize ourselves. But reciprocity was never meant to chain us. It was meant to weave us together. Imagine the relief of learning to say, "Thank you," without immediately planning your repayment. Imagine how much lighter it feels to trust that sometimes kindness is given as a gift, not a bargain. And imagine, too, offering your own generosity in the same spirit, not to bind others, but to set them free. That is the higher calling of reciprocity, to give without asking, to receive without guilt. Consistency, when held with care, becomes not a trap, but a pathway to growth. Think of how habits form. At first they are fragile, like seeds in dry soil. But with the water of repetition, with the sunlight of identity, they grow strong roots. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, no matter how small, you are building evidence of who you are. And evidence is powerful. But remember, evidence can cut both ways. If you repeatedly tell yourself, "I can't change, I always fail," that too becomes consistency, and it chains you. But if you whisper, even shakily, "I am learning, I am growing," and then prove it with small acts, then consistency builds you instead of breaks you. That is why awareness matters, because the small steps you take today become the story you live tomorrow. Social proof is perhaps the most sobering, because it reveals how deeply we are herd creatures. We laugh because others laugh. We eat where the line is longest. We believe what seems widely accepted. And yet, this same instinct, when turned consciously, can be a force for healing. Imagine being the one in your circle who normalizes vulnerability, who says, "I don't have it all figured out," and watches others exhale in relief, finally admitting the same. Imagine being the one who models kindness, who shows patience in frustration, and watches others follow. Social proof can lock us into silence or conformity, but it can also open us into bravery. And perhaps the question is this: what are you teaching others to copy? Because they are watching. They always are. Liking continues to be one of the most underestimated forces of influence, because we forget how deeply people long to feel affinity, to feel warmth. Think of a leader who commands loyalty not through fear or authority, but simply because people like them, because they radiate authenticity. We underestimate how much persuasion begins not in the brain, but in the heart. To be liked is not about being flawless. It is about being real. People like those who are genuine, who show their scars, who listen deeply. If you want to live with influence, do not polish yourself into a mask, reveal yourself into a mirror, so that others see themselves in you. Influence through liking is not manipulation when it is honest. It is simply resonance. Authority, on the other hand, requires humility. It is easy to mistake authority for domination, to think that wearing the badge or carrying the title means you deserve unquestioned obedience. But true authority is rarely about force. It is about trust. It is the kind of presence that makes others feel safe to follow because they sense wisdom, not arrogance. And here is the truth. We each hold authority in some measure. You may not see yourself as an authority figure, but to someone, a child, a friend, a colleague, you are. Your words carry weight. Your actions echo. The question is not whether you have authority, but how you use it. Will you use it to control, or will you use it to guide? Scarcity, finally, brings us back to the fleeting nature of life. We live in a world that often fabricates scarcity to sell us things, but the truest scarcity is time. You do not know how many more mornings you will wake to the sound of birds, how many more times you will hold the hands of the people you love, how many more chances you will have to speak the words you've been holding back. Scarcity is real, but it is not meant to terrify you. It is meant to remind you to live awake, to stop waiting for the perfect moment and instead treasure the imperfect ones you have, to cherish the laughter, the tears, the ordinary afternoons, because they will not come again. Scarcity is not just a principle of persuasion. It is the essence of mortality, and it is the reason presence matters. Here, then, is the midpoint of hope. You may feel a tug of sorrow at realizing how much of your life has already been shaped by these unseen currents. But do not let sorrow sit too long. Let it transform into awareness, and let awareness bloom into choice. You are not defined by the influence that has shaped you until now. You are defined by what you do with this knowledge moving forward. You can choose to see the gifts as gifts, not debts. You can choose to align your consistency with your growth. You can choose to stand when the crowd sits. You can choose to build influence not through manipulation, but through warmth. You can choose to wield authority as guidance. You can choose to honor scarcity by cherishing your fleeting days. Influence is not a cage. It is a key. And now the current brings us to the quiet conclusion of this long journey, where the echoes of every principle, reciprocity, consistency, social proof, liking, authority, scarcity, gather into something larger than persuasion itself. What Cialdini ultimately offers is not just insight into how we are influenced, but a gentle call to reclaim our power, to see the invisible threads and decide how we will respond. And more than that, he gives us a mirror, showing us how we, too, are constantly weaving influence into the world, whether we mean to or not. Think about the moments that have shaped you most. Chances are, they were not grand speeches or manipulative tricks. They were small moments of influence carried in ordinary acts, a teacher who believed in you, a friend who kept showing up, a stranger whose kindness you never forgot. That is influence. It doesn't need flashing lights or rehearsed scripts. It lives in sincerity, in repetition, in presence. And the principles Cialdini uncovered simply make visible what was already true: that humans are moved not just by facts, but by fairness, by coherence, by belonging, by warmth, by trust, and by urgency. This is why it is so important to notice these forces in yourself, because when you understand them, you stop seeing yourself as weak for being swayed. You stop blaming yourself for the times you said yes when you meant no, for the purchases you regretted, for the silences you kept. You begin to see that you were simply human, responding to the same deep currents that move us all. And once you forgive yourself for being influenced, you can begin to forgive others too. We are all just rivers flowing, sometimes colliding, sometimes merging, but always carried by the same tides. And yet, in that awareness, you also discover choice. You realize you can pause when reciprocity pulls you, asking whether this return is truly yours to give. You realize you can release commitments that no longer serve you, whispering to yourself again, "My past commitments do not own my future." You realize you can stand when the crowd sits, becoming the social proof that shifts the silence into courage. You realize you can see through charm and still choose with clarity. You realize you can honor authority while keeping your conscience awake. You realize you can resist manufactured scarcity and instead treasure the true scarcity of time, of presence, of love. That is what awareness does. It doesn't remove the current, but it gives you the strength to swim with intention. And perhaps most importantly, you realize you can use these same principles to influence others with integrity, to give without strings, to model consistency in the values that matter, to spark courage that others can copy, to offer warmth that builds real trust, to hold authority with humility and responsibility, to remind others of the fleeting beauty of the present. This is not manipulation. This is leadership. This is friendship. This is love. Influence becomes not a trick, but a form of service, a way of guiding others toward light rather than shadow. So, let this be your invitation. In the days to come, notice just one moment when influence moves through you, whether as a force acting on you or as a ripple moving outward from you. Pause. Reflect. Ask yourself, am I choosing this freely? Am I influencing with care? Even one such moment of awareness can shift the current of your life. And over time, these small pauses, these small choices, will reshape your path. Influence is not a single act. It is a flow. And you are learning to flow with it. Picture this now. The dawn breaking over a still horizon. The first light of day touching the earth with gold. Every sunrise is both scarce and infinite. Scarce because this exact one will never come again. Infinite because another will always follow. Influence is like that sunrise. Each moment you have to shape or be shaped will never return, and yet the chances keep coming, day after day. And if you greet them with awareness, with intention, with love, then your influence can become like the sun, steady, life-giving, illuminating the path for those who walk beside you. And as this chapter closes, let me leave you with this. You are more powerful than you think. You are not only someone who is influenced, you are someone who influences. Your words, your presence, your choices ripple outward further than you will ever see. So, choose with care. Choose with compassion. Choose with courage. Influence is not the enemy. Blindness is. And you, now, are awake. If this message touched something inside you, if it helped you see more clearly, if it reminded you of the power you carry, I would be honored if you shared it. Like it, comment, subscribe, and pass it along to someone who might need these words. Someone who is still learning to see the strings. Your engagement is not just support, it is influence itself. A ripple spreading light into places we may never reach alone. Together, we can make awareness contagious, kindness powerful, and influence something that heals rather than harms. And so the river flows on, and you with it, awake and aware, carrying light.